We can get started. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Paul McKnight. I'm the program manager for the Microsoft Diagnostics and Recovery Toolset, also known as DaRT. And before we move to the agenda, just to have a quick idea, just show of hands, how many of you have worked or have even at least heard about DaRT? All right, that's great. So the goal of the presentation today, the main reason for the presentation is the release of DaRT 7. We are in the development phase, but we already have our beta out there. We'll talk about, what's in the beta, what's in DaRT 7 overall, and all the new features. However, there are some of you here who never heard about DaRT, and this is something I've been hearing a lot when I talk to customers and go to conferences like this. There are a lot of people who are not familiar with the tool yet. It's, there's a good segment of the MDOP customers that already know about it and use it, but there are MDOP customers who don't know about DaRT. There are customers who don't even know about MDOP, of course. So part of my presentation today, I'm going to give an overview of DaRT. I'm going to explain, start at the high level, explain what is the business case for DaRT, how your company would benefit from using it. And then throughout the presentation, as I go along the features, I'm going to explain to you what's new in DaRT 7. And at the end of the presentation, we're actually going to have two demos. I'm going to deploy DaRT locally to my laptop, and we're also going to go through the remote scenario end-to-end. So for those of you who never heard about DaRT, don't be intimidated. We're going to cover the basics. We're going to go throughout all the installs and how the tool looks like. And for those of you who know about DaRT, this is a great opportunity. This is actually the second time only that we are able to talk about DaRT 7. We announced it a couple of months ago, but at that time our beta was not out. So there were still a few things that we couldn't talk about, or we were not sure about how it would turn out to be in our beta. So today, actually, I'm very excited. It's the first time that I can actually tell you how the product's working, the few changes we already made. I mentioned we're in beta 2. Since we launched beta 1 more than a month ago, we received a great deal of feedback. And actually, some of the changes that we have in beta 2 came from customer requests. So the response to the beta has been awesome. And hopefully you guys, if you're not part of the beta, after watching my presentation, you'll be able to go and download it. And there's actually, if you visit the booth, we're going to have USB sticks with the beta ISO in it. So it's a great opportunity to go there, grab the ISO. It's easy to test. You just pop it up, boot from it, and you'll be able to see what DaRT's about. So starting from the top and really thinking about what is the problem that DaRT's trying to address. The way I think about this is I split this problem in two parts. The first part is enterprises and how they deal with data in laptops and desktops. Now, enterprises spend a lot of money and time planning for disaster recovery. They buy, a lot of products. They have frameworks. They have procedures. However, 95% of the time, that effort is to secure servers. So you have redundancy, you have backups, you have what happens if this server goes down. I have SLAs. I cannot be down for more than 1 minute. But then you have your VP's laptop failing 5 minutes before a presentation, and it's chaos. And even if it's not such a radical scenario, even if it's just your regular user reporting, I installed something here and I just, computer's not turning on. It's just staying there. A lot of companies have, they have help desk departments. They have some tools. However, what we figured out once we started to talk to those companies is that once they got to a point where they couldn't even turn on the computer, their first response was, let's reimage the box. It sounds like a good solution, right? It sounds like, well, we'll start fresh. You get all your applications ready for you. You have your image with all the necessary, applications in there. But at the end of the day, what we also figure after analyzing everything that companies do is that the cost associated with reimaging a machine is not small. You have, first of all, you have data. Again, enterprises do some preparation for that. They instruct end users, save your data in SharePoint, or make a backup, or they have a file server, things like that. However, end users not always do that. And there are situations, even in the most perfect scenario, where your end user saved all his data to the cloud or to some central location. There are always things that you have configured on that laptop and desktop that will be lost. First of all, time. You have to get that laptop from the user. You have to take it to the person who's going to reimage. That end user will need a loaner or something like that. Then you have the time of reimaging the machine. You have the time of bringing back the machine to end user. End user will install third-party tools that are not part of your image. He's going to customize those tools. He's going to go to his Internet Explorer. There's a variety of things that will happen if you reimage that machine that will add a bunch of downtime to that end user. And at the end of the day, that's money that your company is wasting. So that's one part of the problem. The second part is that there are certain tasks that reimaging just will not get you. For instance, we have the scenario at the bottom there. Your CFO is traveling to a meeting, and he was editing some files on the airplane, no Wi-Fi or anything. Computer just goes down. What do? You got to have a recovery strategy for your laptops and desktops, and that's where DaRT comes into the picture. Now, talking about how DaRT fits the Microsoft environment and strategy, those three pillars right there, or themes, whatever we call them, they were developed when we were creating Windows 7. Most of the feedback we got when we were creating Windows 7 fell into those three categories: make people productive anywhere, manage risks through enhanced security and control, and reduce costs. We actually use those three pillars, those three concepts, in many other products, not just Windows 7, but Windows Server, IE, System Center. And then at the bottom left right there, you see the Microsoft Desktop Optimization Pack. That's where DaRT lives. DaRT is part of MDOP. I mentioned that at the beginning, and I forgot to some people don't even know what the acronym MDOP means. That's the Desktop Optimization Pack. It's part of the software assurance license. So enterprises buy that license, and then they have access to MDOP. MDOP's not just DaRT. The next slide is going to show you we have 6 applications. The idea behind MDOP is to provide a ready-to-use set of tools that build on top of your current infrastructure. So you see throughout the presentation, we'll talk about the fact that DaRT is built on top of WinRE. That was not by accident. Every other MDOP tool was built in a way to minimize installation costs, any kind of infrastructure that you need to add in order to use those tools. And especially in the case of DaRT, I was talking about the USBs with the ISO. It's ready to use. You can grab that stick, plug into your computer, you boot from it, and that's it. The investment to use DaRT is very, very low. The wizard that generates the ISO is very simple. It has, I think, 9 steps, and most of it is just pointing to files. You configure what applications are available or not, but that's pretty much it. And the value of the tools, we're going to go through all specific tools and scenarios they covered, is really, really good. You might think that, recovery is not something that happens every day, but the problem is when it happens, it's usually very costly. So DaRT's part of MDOP. I mentioned that MDOP has 6 applications. And within MDOP, we have another 4 themes. So DaRT, as well as DEM, fall into the reduced support costs. Then you have the policy control with AGPM. You have compatibility and management, EPV and MEDV. I was actually part of the MEDV project as well. I know for sure that we have presentations. I think there's one tomorrow. All products are great, but since I worked on MEDV, I just want to call that out. You guys should check it out. It's really, especially for customers who are deploying Windows 7, it's a great solution. EPV is probably the most famous one. Everybody loves EPV. And then we have the asset inventory service. So you can see the theme I mentioned. They're all very focused. They have scope scenarios. They have the different themes, but they're all part of MDOP. And the reason I mention all of that is I was really surprised to talk to some MDOP customers who went through the trouble of getting the licenses and installing the software. But sometimes customers say, I really need EPV. I don't want to know about the other ones. It's just value you're wasting. There's no way that you would not use DaRT. Even if it's in not so many cases, when you use it, you'll definitely benefit from it. So talking about how DaRT will solve that problem I mentioned, the fact that you have a lot of valuable information in your laptop and desktops. There are basically 3 things we do. First of all, when you have a problem and you use DaRT, you'll be able to identify that problem, and there's an advantage right there. Because if you think about, let's come up with a situation where one computer is not turning on. Get the computer, reimage it. Let's say everything works fine. You had the data backed up, everything works fine. Next week, you get another computer. Not turning on. Looks pretty much like the one from last week. Got a reimage. You don't really know what's happening. You might keep reimaging those machines over and over again because you don't know the underlying problem. One of the advantages of using DaRT and doing things like running Crash Analyzer is that you can actually figure out what is wrong. Maybe it's just the video driver or whatever you have on your latest version of the image that's creating that problem. So you actually fix it once, and you don't keep having that recurring cost of reimaging machines. Second part is it's faster. I mean, I'm going to show you guys a little demo, and it's a demo running on a laptop, having a virtual machine running on top of it, so the speed of the demo is not great, but you see how easy it is to just deploy DaRT really easily locally, boot from it. You have the tools available. It's that simple. I mean, reimaging, you need to get to the person who does it, find the right image. There's no comparison between which one is faster. And then the third one is the case I was talking about, the case where reimaging is just not going to help you. You need to recover that file. You need to, let's say, reset a password on your server. We're going to go through all the scenarios. But the point is, DaRT does a lot more things than just replacing your reimaging. I just mentioned reimage a lot because that's what people are doing now. There are some, there's some competition out there as far as other software packages that do similar things, but when we talk to customers, they don't say, well, you guys don't do what Software X does. They just say, well, yeah, but we're fine with just reimage machines. And that's why we try to focus on that. And the top, I forgot to mention that. DaRT is a collection of 14 tools. We focus on recovery, identifying the problem and recovering from it, but we actually have some tools that are not totally within the recovery scenario box. We do some things that are pretty different. It's just a collection of tools that do some really cool stuff, and we'll get to that. And then the final thing on that slide, one of our customers, UMC Health System, they were telling us about their experience with DaRT, and it just blew my mind. They were saying that they save up to 6 hours per instance every time they use DaRT in a situation where it's actually a problem, not customers asking about DaRT, but actually recovering from a problem. They save up to 6 hours. You can't even calculate the amount of time. That's the time they know they saved. There's a bunch of downstream costs that they probably couldn't really figure out. So the savings is really, it's amazing. All right, so talking about scenarios. We have these 14 tools, and once we get to the demo, you guys will be able to see. Some of them are pretty obvious. You can, you have computer management, you can look at your registry, you can look at files. Then we have the more complex ones, like you can use System Sweeper, which is our antivirus. It uses the same engine that other Microsoft antivirus, but it has one big advantage. DaRT is running in this pre-loading environment. It's called WinPE. And the fact that it's running in WinPE means that rootkits and other viruses that kind of trick your antivirus into not fixing the problem, when you run that same antivirus in DaRT, we are able to catch those viruses because we're not even logged into Windows. So there's no account in the domain, there's no drivers loaded. You can actually choose to include drivers in the WinPE in DaRT's image, but the basic WinPE is pretty bare. So that's one advantage, one of the most popular tools we have. We have other things like you want to completely wipe out your hard disk. So this is almost like the opposite of recovering something. We still support that, and the cool thing about this is it supports the same requirements that the military has. So if you run the tool, you'll be able to run it 4 times, I believe, and make sure every single byte was removed from that disk drive, and that's part of DaRT as well. I mentioned resetting passwords. We have a tool called Locksmith, which is interesting because even though most DaRT tools are mostly focused on client, laptops, and desktops, Locksmith is one of the tools that helps a lot when working with servers. Let's say your IT admin left the company and nobody knows the local admin password anymore. Now, if it is costly to reimage your client, laptop, to reimage that server, that would be a big problem. So that's a tool it's used to recover passwords in customers and users' laptops and desktops, but it's also used for servers as well. It's very useful. We have recovering files, and I mentioned that throughout the scenarios I was talking about. It is a very powerful tool. It recovers files even after you, of course, clean from the garbage can. And it's not guaranteed to recover files. It depends on if Windows rebooted and rewrote on top of that same location where the files were. But in our tests, it shows that if you run that tool right away after the files were deleted, we're actually able to recover the whole volume, depending on the situation, at least partially. That's one of our most popular tools as well. And we can actually look at all the other ones once we get to the demos. Crash Analyzer, I mentioned that too. You have Crash Analyzer on the IT admin side and on the DaRT side. So what you actually do is you run DaRT, you get the crash dumps, you save those to a network location or your USB stick, and then you analyze those crash dumps on your IT admin side. Now, I was talking about DaRT 7. We're not done. We're still through our development phase. We will be part of the next MDOT release. So not the release we just had a couple of months, I think. Well, maybe not that long. But the release that we just had for MDOT does not include DaRT 7. It will be part of the next one. I mentioned that the beta is available. You can click on that link. You all have access to the deck. You can go to, it's the same website that we have all our tabs and betas, Microsoft Connect. And you're able to download the bits. You're able to send us feedback. You're able to go through a scenario document we created that basically explains the end-to-end remote scenario, what we would like you to test. And like I said, the best thing for us about this is not only give you access to that early technology, but if you find bugs, if you find problems, improvements that you think should be there and are not there, now it's the time. Even if we cannot include your feedback in DaRT 7, what happens is we use that feedback in our planning phase for the next release. So it's really important that you guys go there and check that out. I kind of touch on the improvements we're making. So we basically had 2 buckets of functionality we added to DaRT 7. We have what we call the software-based remoting. Now, for those of you familiar with DaRT 6.5, you could already do remoting if you had the Intel vPro machines. What we're doing now, we're doing software remoting. So you don't need any special hardware. Anyone can do remote, and we'll go through the prerequisites. But it's pretty easy. It's very similar to remote desktop, with the difference that we created our own clients because, remember, DaRT is running on WinPE, and WinPE has its own limitations. Now, the second bucket is new deployment methods. Some customers were already using those 3 deployment methods, DaRT 6.5 and even before that. But the problem is we, Microsoft, did not support those. So even though they worked, if you had a problem and you called us, we could not help you because basically it was not part of our supported test infrastructure. Because of the software-based remoting scenario, we really felt like we needed to support those additional methods, especially PXE and local partition. USB, of course, is very useful because many computers, many laptops don't even have the CD drive anymore. But PXE and local partition, as you'll see, they play a vital role on the remote scenario. Let me just make sure my computer is not sleeping here. All right. So moving on, let's take a look at how DaRT looks like. So again, you got to separate, there are 2 parts of DaRT. There are a set of tools that run on the IT admin side. That is the software you get when you get the NDOP DVD, you have DaRT MSI, you install that on your computer, you get a set of tools. And then, using those tools, you generate the ISO, end users will boot from that ISO, and they get access to the actual DaRT tools. What you're seeing here on the right side is the DaRT menu. Those are the 14 tools I mentioned. You have the help and the new remote connection on the lower right corner. On the left side, it's something important, is WinRE. Now, WinRE, RE stands for Recovery Environment. WinRE is part of your Windows 7 image. So when you deploy Windows in your environment using MDT, SCCM, whatever you use, you could have a recovery partition that includes WinRE. The only difference, if you use the out-of-the-box WinRE instead of using DaRT, is that you would not have that final link on the left side there that says Microsoft Diagnostics and Recovery Toolset. It will be blank. But you would have access to WinRE. What we've done, part of the MDOP strategy of not trying to rebuild things that are already there in your infrastructure, is that we added on top of WinRE. So you can still use it. You still have access to those 5 tools they created, startup prepare, system restore, and so forth. But once you click on that link, you have access to the additional 14 tools. That means if you deploy WinRE in your environment, you'll be able to just update it to use DaRT. It also means that everything that WinRE provides under the covers is used by DaRT as well. I don't know how many of you have experience with WinRE, but it's integrated with BitLocker, for instance. That's a big issue for us because, remember I told you there's no login to the domain. So the main way to secure, to make sure nobody's going to just walk by your desk and just boot from DaRT, is to have BitLocker there, because only the person who knows that key will be able to boot into that machine. We'll talk more about security in a few minutes. But in any case, we inherit all the infrastructure from WinRE. And that's very important because, first of all, you don't need to train your users. You don't need to train your help desk. And we minimize the area that we're changing, right? We minimize the chance of adding issues and so forth. Now, this is the second part, actually, the first part I mentioned about what you get from DaRT. That's the software you install on the IT admin machine. You can see there on the right side, that's the menu you get on your startup. It's Crash Analyzer, the IT admin side tool, the recovery image, which is the wizard that at the end of the day will generate the ISO, so you can deploy that, and end users and help desk agents will boot from it. You have the remote connection viewer, which is the IT admin side / help desk agent side of the remote connection. It is not the same as remote desktop or any other viewer you have. Even though under the covers it uses the same technology, we decided to build our own viewer just because, again, we wanted to minimize the scenarios. We want to make it very focused only to the connection to the DaRT machine. We didn't want to mix up things that would make things more complicated. And then you have the help and release notes. The first screen here you see on the left side, that's the first screen you get from the wizard. We're updating some of the text and little details, but it's basically what you get. You start from there. Now, those two are probably the two most important screens you go through when you're creating your ISO. The screen on the right side is the new screen for remote connection. Remote connection works in some ways just like any other of the 14 tools for DaRT. You have the option to make it available, or you have the option of disabling it. Why would people disable it? Well, maybe your company's a small company. Maybe you just don't think it's going to be useful. You think it's going to be confusing for end users. They'll click on that link. You won't have documentation. They'll call help desk anyway, and it will be harder for you. Whatever. We just thought about giving you the option to configure that just like you configure any other DaRT tool. If you do choose to allow remote connections, you can specify the port number. That's one of the, we call DCRs, the feature requests we got after we rolled out the first beta. Initially, that port, it was a range that we defined. It was, basically a safe range that we thought was good enough to have that connection going through. We got a lot of feedback saying, well, there's no way I can always open that port of that range of ports in my company, or consultants were telling us, well, some customers will be okay, but others won't. And some people wanted to do things like, I want to use port 80. Well, what we decided to do is you can either say, I want to use a specific port, or you can use the functionality we had before, where we randomize and choose a port for you. There will be documentation around issues with using certain ports, but that's up to the customer. If you guys decide to use port 80, it's your choice. We will have recommendations, we'll have best practices, but at the end of the day, we decided to give the flexibility of choosing that port. And then at the end, that test custom message, the reason we have that is part of the end-to-end remote scenario assumes that the end user called help desk before he gets to the remote scenario. If that did not happen, if the end user just booted from DaRT for whatever reason, clicked on that remote link, we'll at least show that message. That at least should tell him, oh, you got to here, please call help desk because you need them to complete that process. It's basically a backup plan. If your end user got to a point where he should already have called help desk, he will at that point. Now, the dialog on the left is probably the most, the one that has the largest impact during this whole process. Up until DaRT 6.5, and we had that dialog in 6.5 as well, the reason you would hide tools would be because you had probably different levels of IT admins or different levels of help desk agents. So you wanted to create one ISO that had all tools because that guy really can do anything he wants. But then you wanted to create another disk that only had system sweeper because maybe it's just a help desk person. You don't want them to, by accident, click on disk wipe and completely wipe out the whole thing. So up until 6.5, the idea was you run the wizard multiple times, you change the applications that are available or not, and you generate different ISOs, and those ISOs will go to different people. Now, with the addition of DaRT 7, you have other security considerations to make. The ISO needs to be available to end users. The whole remote scenario assumes that the end user will have access to the ISO. The main goal is to avoid having a help desk person to walk in person to the end user's desk. So the end user will be able to boot from DaRT. The help desk will be able to remote into that box, and you didn't waste time having to go there, because sometimes help desk couldn't go to walk to the end user's desk. However, under that assumption, you have to expect that once DaRT is booted, from the time where the end user booted into DaRT until the time where the remote connection is established, the end user will be able to do anything. Anything that is enabled, at least. So the idea here is companies, when we were talking about the remote solution, they said, well, I love it, but I don't want my end users to do anything. I don't want my end users to have access to anything but the remote connection. If that's what you want, you go ahead, you go back to that dialog, you push all the tools to the disabled category, and you just click on enable remote connectivity. However, there are other companies, and they felt really strongly about it, that have their whole support strategy built on the fact that their end users are very tech savvy. So they said, well, you cannot make that decision for me. I want to be able to have my end users booting into DaRT like they do now and just run whatever they want. Maybe I won't give them access to Locksmith, but they could run everything else. So at the end of the day, again, we decided to make it flexible. You can create your ISO and decide what is enabled, what is not, where you're going to deploy it, who's going to have access to it, and that's all based on your support strategy. Two other considerations to call out here about security. I mentioned to you the problem. It's not really a problem, it's a feature. The fact that DaRT boots into this environment that's not part of your domain. You're not really loading any domain drivers or anything. That means if this computer has DaRT, it's turned off, I could walk by, turn it on, go to my PIC-C options or press F12 and go to my local partition option, or stick a DVD for that matter and boot it into DaRT. The ways to avoid that problem that we recommend are, number one, BitLocker. If you have BitLocker deployed, that's a non-problem, because once you boot into DaRT, before it does anything to your computer, it will prompt you for the BitLocker key. If you don't have that key, it will boot into DaRT, but you won't be able to do anything. Second thing, again, because we inherited all the functionality from WinRE, WinRE has a feature that it allows you to request the local admin and password before booting into WinRE. That means before booting into DaRT as well, you get that prompt. If you deploy DaRT locally, that option is always on. If you deploy DaRT to PIC-C, CD, or USB, that option is configurable. Those are pretty much the two ways that we recommend to customers to work around that. Now, there are customers who have other encryption, software or systems deployed to their computers. We don't support those natively, but as we're going to see, I think, in a couple of slides, we allow you to add files to DaRT. So if you do have computers encrypted in some way, all you need to do is to give the end user a way to decrypt that hard drive, and you're secure the same way, because whatever person that is not the owner will not be able to unencrypt that system. All right, that's exactly what I was talking about. So during the creation of the ISO, you're also able to add device drivers and additional files. This could be, some people have different video drivers, some people have some different network drivers, everything else you can think of, encryption drivers, you can add it to here. It will be part of your DaRT image, you will be distributed with it, After you boot into DaRT, you have access to those files as well. All right. After you include all the files, all the drivers, after you define what applications are available and what applications are not available, at the end of the process, you get that ISO file. As I mentioned before, you have basically 4 ways to deploy that ISO. You have the way we supported all along, from version 5 to version 7, which is burning it to a CD or DVD. We did not remove that from the software. Actually, the next one will show you that it's still the only deployment option that's supported natively by the wizard. There is still a very valid scenario for having your senior IT admins, or if you're a smaller company, all your IT admins or all your help desk personnel to have DaRT in a CD or DVD. It's cheaper. It's just what people were doing before. So we did not remove that option from the software. It's still there. We added USB, network PXE, and deploying locally. And we're going to talk about specifically each one of those options in separate slides. The next slide just shows you what I just mentioned, that natively we still have the burning to a DVD option in our wizard. And that's the reason we didn't add more screens to the wizard to deploy to the other 3 is, again, because we don't want to reinvent something you already have. Burning files to a USB, actually, we'll probably have a link. We'll have something that points you to a free tool. It's such an easy process that we just didn't feel like it was such a high priority to add to the tool. But especially PXE and local partition, if you already have a PXE server, or even if you want to start having one now, it's not going to be just because of DaRT, or you should not use DaRT to manage your PXE server. It's a completely separate piece of your infrastructure. We're just playing along with it. Local partitions, same thing. We're going to talk about the fact that if you want to deploy DaRT locally, you'll probably be using MDT, SCCM, some sort of tool that allows you to do that in batch. You're not going to be doing that using your DaRT wizard. So again, we're going to have documentation. We're going to support those options, but we did not try to reinvent things that should already be there in our wizard. So deploying to USB, it is really an easy process. The tool that we linked there is a free tool from CodePlex. Behind the scenes, the only thing that it does is it opens the ISO, copies the file. Actually, before that, it formats the USB drive, opens the ISO, copies the files, and that's about it. I mean, it's a very simple tool. Now, deploying to PXE, the reason it is a very important scenario is if you think about ways your end users will have access to the ISO, that's probably one of the best ones. First of all, you have one location, or maybe a few server locations where you save your ISO. And users are probably somewhat used to being able to boot from network. They will know. You just tell them press F8 or F9, whatever you configure, to see your boot options. It is a very easy way to make sure you have just one ISO file for your whole company. So if you're using that for DaRT 6.5 or for the next version of DaRT, you want to update your ISO, you have one or very few places where you need to update that file. Also, because DaRT is version dependent, meaning DaRT 7.0, just like DaRT 6.5, works only against Windows 7. If your environment still has Windows 6.5 still has Windows Vista or Windows XP or whatever other version, you will need to use the older versions of DaRT. If you're using PXE, all you need to have is the options on the PXE server. And users using Windows Vista, that's okay, just boot from the right version. Also, DaRT is bit dependent, meaning you have to generate different ISOs for 32-bit and for 64-bit. So even if you have everybody updated to Windows 7, if you have 32-bit machines and 64-bit machines, using Pixie Server allows you to have just those two files instead of burning, I don't know how many CDs and USB sticks. However, Pixie is not the solution for everything. First of all, even though we love the remote scenario and we think it's going to be a great addition, it's actually, we think it's going to be a game changer as far as customers who would not be able to use DaRT before, and they will be able to use DaRT now. There's still cases where you don't have connectivity. So you're still going to have to go the old ways of calling your help desk, and they're going to tell you, oh, you could use DaRT. Boot into it, and I'll guide you through it. If you only had DaRT in your Pixie server and you are that VP on the airplane, or you just got to the airport and there's no connectivity, whatever, you can't use it. You need network connectivity. Talking about security, again, this is as much as a concern as the local partition option. If you're in your enterprise environment, everybody will be connected, so you could potentially just press F8, F9, boot into the Pixie. So you need to think about BitLocker, you need to think about passwords, what applications will be available, all of that. The second option that really is important for the remote scenario is the local partition. And this is really, I would say, the most complex one as far as planning, as far as things you need to plan, to not worry about, but things you need to consider when you decide to deploy DaRT in that fashion. It is a very powerful option too. Like I said, it is something that end users will have access all the time. Even for that scenario I just mentioned where you don't have network connectivity, that user will probably be able to boot into his local partition. It is also, it can be used if you're deploying Windows 7, for instance. It can be incorporated into your imaging process. WinRE is part of 7. If you just add DaRT on top of it, you create that separate partition that's BitLocker enabled, that's hidden from the end user, and you can just make it, have DaRT in there, and end users will never know the difference. It will just be your local recovery environment, and you take all full advantage of it. Now, it is also not the solution for all problems. That's why, actually, when we talk about strategies for customers, we never say use this or use that. Customers, at the end up using a combination of methods. Because there are cases where you don't even have access to your hard disk. Let's say your master boot record went bad for whatever reason. You won't be able to boot from your hard disk. So even though this is probably not very likely, if you want to use DaRT as your laptop and desktop recovery strategy, you need to plan around those things. So maybe use a combination of local partition and Pixie, or make sure that you do have technicians that have CDs available for those cases. And so another consideration here is you need to, if you are going to integrate this as part of your deployment option for Windows 7, there are several ways to go. There's MDT, there's SCCM. The demo, which is in a couple of minutes, I'll not go into all those complicated deployment scenarios. There will be another session that Doug's going to be doing, I think on Thursday, that he gives you a quick overview of those methods. There is some, there's some knowledge that needs to be used there. It's not as simple as the demo I'm going to show you, but it's totally doable. We're going to have a white paper after we release DaRT that's going to help you guys go through that process, discover what is best for you and how to make it work. But it is, it's an involved process. If you're going to add that to your deployment infrastructure, you need to prepare and do some testing. And that's actually why we have the demo. The demo basically is a simplified version of deploying DaRT locally. I'm not going to deploy it to the hidden partition. When you deploy Windows, you could have those files in a separate partition that you don't get prompted every time you boot. You only go there when you press the specific key. What we're going to do here is a simplified version where I just use BCD edit. I add a new version, a new line to the boot options. So every time I boot, I'll have a new option saying, you want to boot into DaRT 7. All I do is I use that little script there. That script's available at TechNet. I think I have a link at the end that points to that. Oh, actually, it's right there. It's just not marked as a link. So if you go to that URL, it explains to you what this is about. It's a very simple process. You can use this just to see how easy it is and to see what's the experience when you boot from DaRT locally. So what we'll do now is I'll switch to my laptop. Now, the resolution is not optimal. I apologize for that. But since I'm going to use this for my second demo as well, and the second demo, I need to have access to 2 windows that look pretty much the same size. If I change the resolution, you guys wouldn't be able to see it very well. So what I have here is that same script that I showed on the slide deck. So it's just BCD edit, creating a RAM disk. I extracted the ISO files to a local partition here in my disk called E. Come on. Don't get sleepy. All right. So all I did was I created an E partition. I opened the ISO. I copied the files there. And all that script does is it uses those files to generate a new option for your boot using BCD edit. So let's just go back. I'll run the command. I need to pass a name. So let's call it DaRT TechEd. And then I point where the files are. Script itself doesn't do much. It's immediate. So now, to show you that this worked, I'll close these windows here, and I'll reboot the machine. I apologize for the speed, but I didn't want to make it sound like I faked it, and it was just all ready to go. This is a VM running on my laptop. It's running Windows 7. I had the DaRT. The way I got the DaRT files is I installed the admin tools on that VM. I did everything from that VM. I created the ISO, opened that ISO. There's a boot.wim file. That's the most important file of all. You copy that file to a specific location. There you go. So it booted back. That's the experience I was mentioning to. Is probably not what you want to have in your enterprise. People don't want to see that every time they boot into Windows 7. But it's just to show you how easy it is. So if you are familiar with WinRE, those first screens you're going to see now are exactly the same. We don't really take over until it gets to the point where you click on that Microsoft Diagnostics and Recovery link. So this is booting into WinRE. Again, this is not a way to deploy into your enterprise environment if you want to have all end users to have it. But if you're testing in your lab, you're unsure, you want to show to your management, oh, how does booting locally even work? That's a nice way to just demo it. Now, once it boots, this is the environment here you see behind it. It's WinPE. That's the very simplified Windows version that I mentioned too. This is still WinRE asking us a few questions. Do we want to have network connectivity enabled? Yes, we do. Do you want to remap the letters of the drives? Because the actual drive letters are, Windows 7 takes care of naming those. So what we do here is the best effort to try to make those drives have the same letters. Sometimes, depending on how it was done, if you had partitions and the first partition was not actually C, was D, that will not work perfectly. But most of the times it does. And you could actually see I clicked too quick. You can see up here it says System Recovery Options. So that's just WinRE running. What it's doing now is it's looking on my VM's HD, trying to find all the OSs that are installed there. It will actually give me at least two. I think you can see behind there are already two, which is Windows 7 and that partition where I have DaRT. It doesn't know that the partition doesn't have an OS. But the reason we do that is because, let's say, if you had Vista instead of 7, you would be able to get up to that point. But then when you select Vista and you say Next, you will get a message saying, look, this is DaRT 7. DaRT 7 doesn't support Vista. You need to run another version. Once this finishes, we'll select Windows 7. We'll say you could also load additional drivers at that point as well. There you go. Found Windows 7 and our DaRT TechEd partition. We just say Next. And because this was deployed locally, you always have the password prompt. Again, this is still WinRE. We're just playing along. If it lets me click here. Come on. There you go. Well, let's go. It's amazingly slow. It wasn't like that before the demo, which always happens. There you go. So, this is the WinRE screen, and that is the DaRT link I mentioned to you. For this demo, I'll stop right here, and once we talk about the remote functionality, we'll restart from there. But let's go back to the deck and talk a little bit more about, actually, the next thing I have here is a video. So as I mentioned to you, the way I just demoed right now, it's a very simplistic way to deploy locally. We have the presentation from Doug that kind of explains how to do it using MDT and other tools. But we also have the Springboard series video that explains a little bit how to deploy with MDT. And I thought it was interesting to show you guys just a little piece of it.
I've prepared the deployment share by adding optimized desktop applications to it and creating a custom task sequence that adds Office 2010 to the AppV cache. I'm also deploying BitLocker drive encryption to client computers by using MDT, so I need to customize the Windows recovery environment. By default, the Windows recovery environment will remain on the partition that is protected with BitLocker, and therefore be inaccessible when the F8 boot option is selected. So I need to move the Windows recovery environment image from the default location on the C drive after successfully deploying Windows 7 by using MDT 2010. To do that, I'll use a custom script that moves the boot image file. I'll then incorporate the DaRT tools into the Windows recovery environment to provide additional resources for service desk technicians to use to support client machines. The folder you see here is an extracted copy of the ERD ISO file generated by the Emergency Repair Disk Commander Wizard, available in the Diagnostics and Recovery Toolset. I'm simply going to copy the boot.wim file from the ERD to the scripts folder of the deployment share and rename it to winre.wim so that the Windows recovery environment will work correctly. In addition to copying winre.wim to the deployment share's scripts folder, I need to copy the script that will customize the Windows recovery environment to it. The zcustomwindowsre.wsf script moves the winre.wim file from the CMDT-DS scripts directory to the hidden BDE drive partition on the client computer. It uses a scripted diskpart command to unhide and hide this hidden partition, which explains the purpose of the zdiskpart text files. You can download zcustomwindowsre.wsf and the zdiskpart text files from the link you see here. I'll also customize the script to move the boot image I copied to the scripts folder to the correct location on the Windows 7 client computer. You see those modifications here. Adding zcustomwindowsre.wsf and the zdiskpart text files to the deployment isn't enough. I also need to add a custom step to the task sequence that runs the script. You see that command here. Now, this task sequence will run zcustomwindowsre.wsf during the state restore phase. The script will copy the boot image from the scripts folder to the appropriate location on the client computer, so that with BitLocker turned on, pressing F8 will still start the ERD.
All right, so that was just a small part of that whole video. And if you go to Springboard, you'll be able to watch the whole thing. And that is just one other resource when you're considering deploying DaRT that way. It's a great way to just be prepared. We've been talking about remote supporting, so I just wanted to give you guys a bit more information about it before showing you the demo. So I mentioned before the fact that we had remote functionality in DaRT 6.5. It was hardware-based. It's actually, again, it's not something that we're saying should not be used or we remove support. It's still there. It's very useful. If you have machines that leverage that technology, it actually provides a few things that our software remoting just can't. We're going to support DaRT being remoted, but the Intel remotes the whole machine. So you're able to see the machine rebooting. You're able to see things that in the software world we cannot do, because once we break that remote connection, once that end user machine is rebooting, we have to reestablish that connection again. But the reason we decided to do the software base was because many customers came back to us and said, look, it's a great technology, but we're not going to be able to deploy that to all 100,000 computers we have. So using the software remoting, we will cover those cases. We will allow customers that were interested in using DaRT but could not use DaRT before. Now, the reason they couldn't use DaRT, many reasons, but mostly they had remote users. Like if you have a big location like Microsoft, we have our Redmond campus, and maybe help desk can walk over and help you if you're in Redmond. But for instance, I'm in Utah. If my computer is not working, I call Redmond, they won't be able to come over. I'll have to ship my computer or something. So really, DaRT wouldn't help very much, because I ship my computer. Using DaRT at that point, it loses some of the value anyway. Then you have organizations that don't even have support on-premise. You have organizations that are outsourcing their support. So it's the other way around. They have all the employees in one place, but their support is in India or some other place where there's just no way to have people walking over to your desk and booting from a CD. So by adding the software remote capability, what we're doing is we're allowing more customers to use DaRT, and they were just not able to use DaRT before. Now, some of the scenario requirements, there's many ways when you talk about remoting into DaRT. There are many things that we could do. We could just say, well, I want my computer to magically connect to end users' computers and just, without the end user even knowing it. That is not the scenario we're after here. The scenario here is what we call the assisted remote connection. So the end user is the one booting into DaRT, therefore all the implications about having the ISO available to end users, and the end user needs to call help desk. The reason the end user needs to call help desk is because there's no authentication when you log into DaRT, and we did not create a way to make the connection start from the end user and go to the help desk computer. It's the other way around. The end user enables the connection on his side, but then the help desk person connects to the end user's computer. The way we validate that connection, we have 3 pieces of information. We have the end user's IP address, we have the end user's ticket number, which is a number we just created, random number, and then we have the port number. And that was the whole discussion about the port number when you create the ISO. If you want to specify a number, specific range, or whatever you want there, you can do when you prepare your ISO. The last point here about both computers need to be in the same network, my developers always say, don't frame it in a way that confuses people. So what really is the requirement here is that your help desk computer can ping the end user's IP address. How you achieve that, it's up to you. What we recommend is that you're in the same network, hopefully within your intranet, so you have all the security, you don't have people from outside connecting. If you want to add additional layers, if you have your own security, if you want to make it work through your VPN, or whatever way you want to enable that connection, you're free to do it. WinPE has some limitations. We had customers asking us, do you support VPN? And the question is not really if we support VPN. The question is does your VPN client supports WinPE? If it supports WinPE and you can run it in their environment and you can connect to the server, we support it. So it's really, it depends on your environment, depends on what scenario you're trying to achieve. We, especially after that change for the port number, we made it pretty flexible, pretty open-ended, so you can pretty much do what you need to do as far as that connection happening. All right, so here's a step-by-step. We kind of talked about this, but that will make it more clear. The scenario starts with the end user running into some sort of an issue. Computer's not turning on, don't know what to do. Ideally, he will call help desk. Help desk will identify that problem and will say, well, this sounds like something that DaRT could fix. So help desk will tell the end user, boot into DaRT. End user could have booted into DaRT before that, and that scenario would actually start with the number 3 there, provide connection info. But we believe that in most cases the end user will call help desk. End users will not know what DaRT's for and what remote connection means. So you need to train your help desk agents for that step. At that point, the end user will be running DaRT. It will connect to the remote functionality, and it will provide those 3 pieces of information I talked about: IP address, ticket number, and port number. On the IT admin side, he will run the remote viewer that has a window that looks exactly like the one on the end user side, but this time the help desk admin inputs that data, clicks on connect, assuming your connection is working perfectly, meaning that the IP address that you're giving that help desk person is accessible, connection starts. At that point, the end user will not have control of his computer anymore. And the reason is, when we talked about what tools are enabled or disabled, once the help desk person connects to your computer, all tools are enabled. So if the end user had access to his mouse and his keyboard, potentially he could run tools that you didn't want him to run in the first place. Only the help desk person can run those tools. If the connection drops, if the admin, the help desk person loses power, whatever, DaRT on the end user side will realize that the connection was broken, It will give control back to the end user. However, it will also gray out those applications to the same way they were before. So theory says help desk fixes the problem, and he has access to options to reboot that computer, the end user computer, from his side. So he could either just say, oh, you know, I'm going to close my connection. Now you just press power off or press that button and restart. Or he could actually do that for an end user. You know, many cases when they start that kind of connection, the end user just leaves. Because he won't be interested in looking, you know, tools running and all of that. It might take a while if you're running the sweeper or something like that. Help desk can click a button, restart, and user goes back to his desk. It's back to Windows 7, and hopefully everything's working. All right, so now it's time to actually show you guys this whole thing. Magically, my computer's faster again. So all I did was I clicked on that link in WinRE, and this is the DaRT menu. As you can see, I have the 14 tools. I decided to disable 2, Locksmith and Disk Wipe. So assuming I'm the end user, we're simulating a real case. I either have help desk on the phone right now, or I booted into DaRT, got into that screen, said, oh, that's cool. Let me see what this does. I could do whatever I wanted. But what we really want him to do is to click here. That is the test message. So that's the same message you customized when you were generating the ISO. If the end user hasn't called the help desk yet, it would have a phone number, it would have enough information in here to guide him and call help desk appropriately. Say yes, and you get the connection open. What's actually happening now is the connection is open, but nobody is actually doing anything, so the end user still has control. Now, my laptop's playing the help desk person side here. That person has this application here installed. It's part of those tools you get when you install the MSI from the DVD. You can actually choose just to install this one and not install the wizard. Because with DaRT 7, you actually have 2 admin roles. You have the role that generates the ISO, and you have the role of the help desk person that works with end users. Could be the same person, could be different people. So I run this, and as you can see, actually let me change the IP address, because this one. So one more thing I didn't mention, you have all your available IP addresses, IPv4, and we also support IPv6. That will be the information the end user reads to the help desk person. So 456, 319, 704, 172, 44, 5737, and that's the port number. When I generated the ISO, I did not specify a port number. I just left it, you know, to be picked by the software, so it's a random port. If I close this connection and open another one, that port number will be different. 49165. Click on connect, and there you go. Not very fast, but it will be a lot faster. During our testing process, we had our ISO deployed to our global servers at Microsoft, and our IT department, and I was part of that test as well. We didn't really solve problems. We were simulating problems with DaRT, but we connected to people in France, Italy, all over the world, and it was super fast. Now, granted, our network is fast, but again, it's a very lightweight solution for this kind of scenario. Now, if I try to go here on my VM and do anything, my mouse and my keyboard would just not work. The help desk side has total control. I can move this to the side, I can minimize, and another good benefit of building this on top of WinRE, I just added remoting into WinRE. I can run any of those tools. Doesn't matter. Remember I mentioned the shutdown and restart? From the start, it was something that we wanted. WinRE already had it, so we didn't even create one. You want to restart that computer, you click on Restart here. You can run any other tools you want. You can see the screen on the right is now all the tools are available. Remember, Locksmith and Disk Wipe were not available. After I connected, after that dialog says connection established, help desk connected actually, those two applications became available. If for any reason, and then I could run tools. We talked about those. You have the simpler ones like Registry Editor. I could run Locksmith. I could run any of the tools. It's pretty, especially for customers who were using DaRT 6.5. We fixed bugs. We added, cleaned up the code and everything. But the 14 tools we had there before, they're pretty much the same. We optimized them, but really our main focus in DaRT 7 was creating the remote capability. Which, by the way, this is the first release of DaRT where we're not just making it work with the new OS. DaRT 5 worked for XP, 6 worked for Vista, 6.5 was the first version that worked for 7.0. This is the first time that we actually didn't wait until the next version of Windows. We decided to do this update right now just because of the massive number of customers asking us for this remote capability. That's why I said I really think it's going to be a game changer. In any case, you run the tool, you fix the problem. At the end of the process, you can either close this window. If you close this window, what you're actually doing is you're giving control back to the end user. Or you could simply come here to File and say Disconnect. It will have the same effect. The only difference is if I close this window, in order to connect to that computer again, I need to start a new session. New ticket, new port number. If I just say disconnect, this is simulating the case where the admin lost connectivity on his side. Since the end user might not even be available at that time, that same admin will still have that information here, so he's able to connect again. But most likely, what's going to happen is you're going to come here, and you're just going to say restart. Now, the viewer, the IT admin side, that's the limitation I was telling you about. It's remote connectivity to that session. It's actually in the process of timing out. You cannot see the end user machine rebooting, but there you go. We went back to that boot screen. And if I don't do anything, we'll boot into Windows 7, and everything will be back to normal. All right, that is Doug's session I mentioned. It is on Thursday, 10:15. I would highly recommend you guys to attend this session. It builds on top of everything I talked about today. Doug's not going to give you an overview of DaRT. He's going to go right from the MDT part. He's going to make it look more real. That little video I showed you, he's going to build on top of that. He's going to actually show you how the screens look like. I think he actually demos using SCCM to deploy the boot.wim, which is, if you already have computers out there with your remote partition and you just want to replace WinRE boot.wim with DaRTs, it's as easy as that. He's going to talk about MDT. He's going to talk about additional ways to customize WinRE. So it's really a great session. Something I don't have in there, but you guys should definitely check out as well. There's a hands-on lab where you're able to run all that wizard process. You'll be able to generate your ISO. I don't know if they go as far as letting you boot into that ISO, but it will be as easy as just having that VM point to the ISO. You don't even need to deploy it locally. So please check that out. It's very interesting as well. You have all the track resources. Please fill out the surveys. I look at those. If you guys want anything that I didn't talk about, if you think I was too technical, not too technical, let me know. If you think it was a good presentation, I will love that as well. And please stop by the booth and we'll get you those USB sticks. Thank you very much.